The distress signal cut through the darkness of space like a scream. It reached every communication hub in the known galaxy within minutes. The message was simple and desperate. The Valoran colony on the mining moon of Ixtheta was dying. Captain Jiho sat in his command chair aboard the battlecruiser Indomitable, listening to the message for the third time. The voice belonged to High Scholar Velmora, leader of the peaceful Valorans. Her species had never known war. They spent their lives studying mathematics and philosophy. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no way to defend themselves. Now something called the Krathic Swarm was attacking them. "Play the visual feed," Jiho said quietly. The main screen flickered to life. Jiho's jaw tightened. The Krathics were like nothing he had seen before. They moved like insects but were the size of ships. Their bodies were dark and segmented, covered in organic armor. They didn't use metal ships or engines. They were the ships. Thousands of them swarmed around the Valoran colony, tearing through their buildings like paper. Commander Yuna stood beside Jiho's chair. She was his tactical officer, and had served with him for 8 years. She knew what he was thinking before he spoke. "The Galactic Council received the same message 2 hours ago," Yuna said. "They voted against intervention. 37 species voted no, only 3 voted yes. The motion failed. Why?" Jiho asked, though he already knew the answer. "They're afraid. The Krathics have destroyed 14 civilizations in the past 50 years. Every species that fought them lost. The Council thinks the Velerans are already gone. They don't want to waste resources on a lost cause." Jiho stood up from his chair. He was not a tall man, but when he moved, people noticed. There was something about the way humans carried themselves that made other species nervous. Maybe it was their eyes. Human eyes looked forward like predators. Most peaceful species had eyes on the sides of their heads. "Get me Ambassador Nari on the line," Jiho said, "and prepare the Third Fleet for immediate departure." Yuna didn't question the order. She had seen that look in his eyes before. "Sir, the Council will not approve this. If we move without authorization, they could revoke our membership." "Then we'll be expelled," Jiho said. "But those people down there will be alive." The communication screen lit up. Ambassador Nari appeared, her face tight with frustration. She was on the Council station, surrounded by representatives from 100 different species. Most of them looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. "Captain," Nari said, "I assume you heard the Council's decision?" "I did. I'm rejecting it." The other ambassadors in the background started making noise. Several different species began shouting in their own languages. The translators struggled to keep up. Jiho could hear words like reckless and dangerous and typical Deathworlders. That word again, Deathworlders. It was what the galaxy called humans. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. It was a planet that should have been impossible for intelligent life to evolve. The gravity was crushing compared to most worlds. The atmosphere had poisonous oxygen levels. The star that Earth orbited threw out radiation that would sterilize most planets. Diseases and predators lurked everywhere. Natural disasters happened constantly, and yet humans thrived there. When humanity finally developed faster-than-light travel and met other species, the galaxy was horrified. How did anything survive on such a nightmare world? The answer was simple. They became tougher than the planet itself. "Ambassador Nari," said a voice from the screen. It belonged to High Chancellor Thexel, a Paxili who led the Council. His species looked like tall, thin crystals. They moved slowly and spoke carefully. "Your species must understand. The Krathics cannot be defeated. They adapt to every weapon, every strategy. They are a force of nature." "Then it's good we're sending humans," Nari said calmly. "We know a lot about surviving forces of nature." Thexel made a sound like breaking glass. It was how his species showed frustration. "This is exactly why many species fear your kind. You see a problem and immediately think of violence." Jiho leaned forward into the camera. "With respect, Chancellor, we didn't create this problem. We're just the only ones willing to solve it." He cut the transmission. Yuna was already at her station pulling up fleet positions. "The Third Fleet can be ready in 30 minutes. 50 ships total. We're currently positioned at the edge of mapped space, which puts us closer to Ixtheta than any Council fleet." "How long to reach them?" 4 days at maximum FTL speed." "But sir," Yuna hesitated. "Intelligence reports say the Valoran colony will fall within 3 days. We might be too late." "Then we push the engines past maximum," Jiho said. "Contact engineering. Tell Taeyang I need 5% more from the FTL drives. I don't care if we burn them out after we arrive." We only need to get there once. Lieutenant Doyen's voice crackled over the intercom. He was the leader of the fighter squadron, currently doing patrol runs around the fleet. Captain, my pilots are hearing rumors. Are we really going after the Krathiks? Affirmative, Lieutenant. Recall all fighters and prep for combat operations. This is not a drill. There was a pause. Then Doyen laughed. It was the kind of laugh that made other species uncomfortable. Humans laughed at danger. It was another thing that made them strange. Finally, Doyen said, some real action. My people will be ready. Across the Third Fleet, similar conversations were happening on 50 ships. Human crews prepared for battle with an efficiency that seemed almost mechanical. Weapons were armed. Shields were calibrated. Fighters were loaded into launch bays. Medical Officer Yunji began setting up trauma centers. Engineer Taeyang started pushing every engine to its absolute limit. This was what humans did best. They prepared for war with the same dedication others used for art or science. On the moon of Ix Theta, High Scholar Velmora huddled with the last survivors of her colony. They were deep underground in ancient mining tunnels. The Krathiks were above them, tearing through the rock layer by layer. They would reach the refugees soon. Velmora had sent the distress signal knowing it was hopeless. The council would not come. No one would risk their fleets for a colony of peaceful mathematicians. She gathered the children close and began singing an old Valoran song about stars and hope. Then something changed. Her communication device blinked. A new message appeared. This is Captain Jiho of the human battlecruiser Indomitable. We received your distress call. The Third Fleet is en route. Hold your position. We will reach you in 3 days. You are not alone. Repeat, you are not alone. Help is coming. Velmora stared at the message. Humans. The Deathworlders. The species that terrified half the galaxy. They were coming to save people they had never met. She played the message for the others. The children stopped crying. The adults stopped their prayers of farewell. Someone asked if humans were as scary as the stories said. Velmora thought about that question. Then she smiled for the first time in days. I hope so, she said. I truly hope so. In the cold darkness of space, the Third Fleet jumped to faster than light speed. 50 warships vanished in flashes of light, racing toward a battle that the rest of the galaxy said was already lost. But humans had never been good at accepting loss. The galaxy had not always feared humans. When they first developed faster-than-light travel and made contact with the Galactic Council, most species were simply curious. Here was a new spacefaring civilization, eager to join the community of advanced worlds. The Council sent a delegation to Earth to perform the standard evaluation. That evaluation changed everything. Ambassador Crixall of the Paxili species led that first delegation. He remembered the moment his ship entered Earth's orbit. His science officer had been reviewing the planetary data with growing horror. Ambassador, the science officer said, his crystalline body flickering with distress colors. This planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. Gravity is 1.3 times our standard. Atmospheric oxygen is at toxic levels. The star's radiation should have sterilized the surface. There are active volcanoes, shifting tectonic plates, and weather systems that generate winds capable of destroying cities. Crixall studied the data. There must be an error. Intelligent life cannot evolve under these conditions. But there was no error. Earth was a nightmare world, and humans had not only survived, but built a global civilization. When the delegation landed, they were greeted by Ambassador Nari, who seemed completely unbothered by the crushing gravity and dangerous atmosphere that made the visitors uncomfortable, even in their protective suits. The Paxili ran tests. They wanted to understand how humans functioned. What they discovered terrified them. Human reaction times were 3 times faster than the galactic average. Their bodies could heal from injuries that would kill most species. They could survive for days without food and water. Their immune systems fought off diseases with a ferocity that seemed almost aggressive. They could tolerate temperature ranges that would send other species into shock. But the most disturbing discovery was their eyesight. Human eyes faced forward. Predator eyes. Every peaceful species in the galaxy had eyes on the sides of their heads to watch for danger. Humans had evolved to be the danger. Crixall remembered asking Ambassador Nari about this. She had smiled. That was another thing that bothered many species. When humans smiled, they showed their teeth. All of their teeth were sharp. Even their flat teeth had edges that could tear. We evolved alongside some of the deadliest predators in the galaxy, Nari had explained. Big cats, bears, crocodiles, venomous snakes. Our ancestors survived by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than everything that wanted to eat them. We became persistence hunters. We would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to work together, to plan, to use tools. We turned everything into a weapon. The delegation filed their report. The council debated for months about what to do with humanity. Some species wanted to quarantine Earth, keep the Deathworlders contained. Others argued that humans deserved a chance. They had developed art, music, philosophy. They were more than just survivors. The council made their decision. Humanity would be allowed to join, but with restrictions. Human military vessels were limited in number. Human colonies were monitored. The galaxy would watch and wait to see if Deathworlders could be trusted. Commander Yuna had studied all of this history during her training at the Naval Academy. Now, standing on the bridge of the Indomitable as it raced through faster-than-light space, she understood why the Council feared them. It was not just because humans were strong or fast. It was because they never stopped fighting. She walked to the navigation station where Lieutenant Suman was monitoring their course. Suman was one of their best fighter pilots, but she also had a degree in xenobiology. She understood other species better than most humans. We're pushing the engines at 105% capacity, Suman reported. Taeyang says we can maintain this for 3 days. After that, we'll need major repairs. That's all we need, Yuna said. 3 days to reach Ixtheta. Suman looked at her commander. The other species don't understand us, do they? They think we're rushing into battle because we love fighting, don't we? Yuna asked with a slight smile. No, Suman said seriously. We fight because we hate bullies. Earth taught us what happens when you ignore danger. You die. But it also taught us that the strong should protect the weak. That's not something predators usually learn. Yuna nodded. She had seen the data on the Krathiks. They were a hive species, driven by instinct to consume and expand. They had started on a Class 11 death world, almost as hostile as Earth. But while humans had learned cooperation, the Krathiks had learned only hunger. In the fighter bay, Lieutenant Doyen was briefing his squadron. 30 pilots sat in front of him, all wearing their flight suits. Each pilot had logged hundreds of hours in combat simulations. Some had real combat experience from border skirmishes with pirate fleets, but none had faced anything like the Krathiks. Here's what we know, Doyen said, bringing up a holographic display. The Krathiks are bioships, living creatures that can survive in space. They don't use traditional engines or shields. Their armor is organic and can regenerate. They move in swarm formations, overwhelming enemies with numbers. One of the younger pilots raised his hand. Sir, if they can regenerate and they outnumber us, how do we win? Doyen grinned. We cheat. The Krathiks have evolved to fight species that play by the rules. They're used to enemies that keep their distance, that rely on shields and energy weapons. We're going to get close. Real close. We're going to use kinetic weapons, missiles, and if necessary, our ships themselves. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten someone under human protection. The pilots nodded. They understood. This was not just about tactics or strategy. This was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humans kept their promises. In her laboratory aboard the science vessel Discovery, Dr. Hyejin was analyzing everything known about the Krathiks. As the head of the Human Xenobiology Institute, she had access to data from all 14 civilizations the Krathiks had destroyed. She was looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that could help the fleet. What she found was disturbing. The Krathiks adapted to every weapon used against them. Energy weapons that worked in the first battle were useless by the second. Kinetic weapons were effective longer, but eventually the Krathiks developed armor that could deflect them. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. The Krathiks had encountered and adapted to all of them. But then Hyejin noticed something interesting. None of the civilizations the Krathiks had fought came from death worlds. They were all from peaceful planets with stable climates and gentle ecosystems. They had developed technology through cooperation and trade, not through constant survival challenges. Earth was different. Humans had evolved alongside constant threats. Viruses that mutated, bacteria that developed resistance, predators that adapted hunting strategies. The human immune system was essentially an adaptive war machine, constantly evolving to fight new threats. Hyejin sent her findings to Commander Yuna. The message was simple. The Krathix's greatest strength was adaptation, but humans had evolved specifically to fight enemies that could adapt. This was going to be a battle between two species that refused to lose. On the bridge, Captain Jiho received regular updates. The Council was furious about the Third Fleet's unauthorized mission. Several species were demanding that humans be expelled from the Council. Others were watching with interest. A few had even quietly sent messages of support, but Jiho ignored the politics. His focus was on the mission. Every 6 hours he sent a message to High Scholar Velmora, assuring her that help was coming. Each time she responded with updates on the situation. The Krathix were getting closer. The refugees were running out of time. Captain, Yuna said, "We're receiving a transmission from the Zenthari Empire. They're offering tactical data on the Krathix." Jiho was surprised. The Zenthari were a warrior species, proud and territorial. They rarely helped others. "Put them through." A Zenthari general appeared on the screen. His species looked reptilian with scales and sharp claws. "Captain Jiho, we fought the Krathix 5 years ago. We lost 3 fleet groups before we retreated. I am sending you our battle records. Study them. Learn from our mistakes. Why help us?" Jiho asked. The general's eyes narrowed. "Because someone needs to stop them. And if the stories about human stubbornness are true, you might actually succeed where we failed. Besides, we are curious. We want to see if Deathworlders are as dangerous as the rumors say." The transmission ended. Data began flooding into the Indomitable's computers. Yuna started analyzing it immediately. 3 days. That was all the time they had. 3 days to cross half the galaxy, plan an attack against an enemy that had never been defeated, and save a species that the rest of the galaxy had already given up for dead. But humans had built their entire civilization on doing the impossible. The Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the Ix-Theta system. 50 warships appeared simultaneously, their formation perfect. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Jiho studied the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Krathix swarm was even larger than intelligence had reported. 300 bioships circled the mining moon like a massive living storm. Each Krathix was the size of a small cruiser, their dark bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They moved with coordination that seemed impossible for individual creatures. "Scan the surface," Jiho ordered. The sensors officer worked quickly. "Sir, I'm detecting life signs in the underground tunnels. The Valorans are still alive, but the Krathix have breached the outer tunnel systems. They have maybe 4 hours. 4 hours. They had made it in time, but barely." Commander Yuna stood at the tactical station analyzing the enemy formation. "The Krathix have positioned themselves in a defensive sphere around the moon. Standard swarm doctrine. They'll try to surround any attacking force and overwhelm them with numbers. Then we don't give them the chance to surround us," Jiho said. He opened a channel to all ships. "This is Captain Jiho to all vessels. We're going to do something the Krathix have never seen before. We're going straight through them." On the other ships, human crews received the order without surprise. This was how humans fought. Direct, aggressive, relentless. Lieutenant Doyen sat in the cockpit of his fighter, designated Valkyrie 1. Around him, 29 other fighters prepared to launch. His wingmate Lieutenant Suman was in Valkyrie 2. "All fighters, this is Doyen, remember your training. Krathix bioships are tough, but they're still organic. Hit the joints between body segments. Aim for the sensory clusters near their heads. And whatever you do, don't let them grab you. Their limbs secrete acid." The fighter bay doors opened. Space stretched before them, filled with enemy contacts. Valkyrie Squadron launch. 30 fighters shot out of the Indomitable like bullets. They accelerated to speeds that would have torn apart most alien pilots. Humans could handle G-forces that would cause other species to black out. Their bodies had evolved for endurance, for pushing past pain and exhaustion. The Krathix swarm noticed the approaching fleet. They began to shift, preparing to envelope the human ships, but Captain Jiho had anticipated this. All ships execute Protocol Thermopylae. Now, the fleet suddenly split into 5 groups. Each group drove toward a different point in the Krathix formation, forcing them to divide their forces. It was an ancient human strategy, named after a battle where 300 warriors held off an army of thousands by fighting in a narrow pass. The Krathix could not surround all 5 groups at once. They had to choose where to concentrate their forces. And while they were deciding, the humans opened fire. The Indomitable's main cannons erupted. Unlike the energy weapons most species used, human ships relied heavily on kinetic weapons. Massive slugs of metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed. When they hit a Krathix bioship, the result was devastating. The organic armor that could deflect energy beams shattered under the impact. Doyen led his fighter squadron into the thickest part of the swarm. Valkyrie 1 twisted and rolled through space, dodging Krathix limbs that lashed out like whips. He fired his missiles at point-blank range, watching them punch through armor and explode inside Krathix bodies. Valkyrie 2, watch your 6, Doyen shouted. Suman rolled her fighter inverted, dodging 3 Krathix that had been closing on her tail. She returned fire, her cannon stitching a line of destruction across their bodies. Thanks for the heads up. The battle became chaos. The Krathix had never faced an enemy like this. Most species tried to maintain distance, relying on long-range weapons and shields. Humans flew right into the swarm, using the Krathix's own numbers against them. When multiple Krathix converged on one human ship, they often collided with each other. But the Krathix were learning. They began adapting their tactics, trying to grab human ships instead of ramming them. Their acid-secreting limbs could eat through even reinforced armor. The destroyer Defiant took a direct hit. 3 Krathix grabbed onto its hull, their limbs burning through the metal. The ship's captain, Commander Minho, made a decision that would become legendary. All hands abandoned forward sections. Engineering, give me everything the engines have. The Defiant accelerated directly toward the largest cluster of Krathix bioships, the 3 enemies still clinging to its hull. At the last moment, Minho gave the order. The ship's nuclear reactor was deliberately overloaded. The Defiant exploded like a miniature sun, taking 17 Krathix with it. The crew had evacuated seconds before. They were picked up by rescue shuttles even as the battle raged around them. Jiho watched from the Indomitable's bridge. Every ship lost hurt, but they were winning. The Krathix swarm, which had seemed invincible, was breaking apart. Human tactics were working. Human weapons were effective. And most importantly, human determination was unshakable. Then the Krathix did something unexpected. They adapted. Commander Yuna saw it first. Captain, the Krathix are changing their attack pattern. They're targeting our engines specifically. They're trying to disable us rather than destroy us. It was a smart adaptation. Dead ships stopped fighting. Disabled ships became obstacles, blocking firing lanes and complicating maneuvering. The Krathix were learning from every engagement, but humans could adapt too. All ships, Protocol Sparta, go kinetic. The human fleet shut down their missiles and energy weapons. They relied purely on kinetic slugs and their own momentum. Ships became weapons themselves, ramming Krathix at high speed before pulling away. It was brutal. It was dangerous. It was effective. The Indomitable took heavy damage when 5 Krathix concentrated fire on its starboard side. Alarms blared across the bridge. Engineer Taeyang's voice came over the intercom, shouting over the sound of explosions. Captain, we've lost main power. Engines are offline. Life support is on emergency backup. The ship went dark. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. The Indomitable was dead in space, drifting, and the Krathix were closing in. Jiho stood up from his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew was already working to restore power. No one panicked. This was what they trained for. Crisis management under impossible conditions. Yuna, plot a collision course with the Krathix flagship. Manual control. Yuna looked at him. Sir, without engines, we're on a ballistic trajectory. If we commit to this, we can't pull away. Then we better make it count. Taeyang, how long until you can give me even partial power? The engineer's voice crackled back. 30 seconds. Maybe 40. I'm bypassing every safety system we have. Do it. The Indomitable drifted toward the largest Krathix in the swarm. It was massive, easily twice the size of the battle cruiser. It seemed to sense the approaching human ship and moved to intercept, its limbs spreading wide to grab them. On the bridge, every console was dark except for the weapon controls. Yuna had routed all remaining power to the forward cannons. It would be one shot. That was all they would get. The Krathix flagship filled the view screen. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster, as if it were excited about the kill. It reached for the Indomitable with limbs that could crush the ship like a tin can. Then Taeyang performed a miracle. Power surged back through the ship. The engines roared to life. The Indomitable suddenly accelerated, closing the distance in seconds. Fire! Jiho ordered. Every forward cannon fired simultaneously. At point-blank range, the kinetic slugs tore into the Krathik's flagship. The organic armor, which had deflected dozens of previous attacks, simply disintegrated. The slugs punched through vital organs, shattering the creature from the inside. The Krathik's flagship thrashed in its death throes. Jiho grabbed the command chair as the Indomitable pulled hard to port, barely avoiding the creature's final spasm. The death of the flagship sent shockwaves through the Krathik's swarm. They communicated through pheromones and bioelectric signals. The loss of their largest, oldest member disrupted their entire coordination. Lieutenant Doyen saw the opening. All fighters hit them now. They're confused. Valkyrie Squadron dove back into the fight. Now the Krathiks were reacting instead of attacking. They tried to retreat to regroup, but the humans gave them no space. Every time a Krathix turned to flee, it was hit by missiles or kinetic fire. Suman's fighter took critical damage when a dying Krathix lashed out randomly. Her power core was compromised. She had maybe 10 seconds before it exploded. She didn't hesitate. She aimed her crippled fighter at the densest cluster of Krathix and ejected the power core. Then she triggered her emergency teleporter, vanishing in a flash of light and reappearing inside a rescue shuttle. The power core detonated. The explosion looked like a small star being born. 12 Krathix died instantly. 20 more were badly injured. The battle raged for another hour. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Krathix, who had never retreated in their entire history as a species, began to flee. They abandoned the moon, leaving behind their dead and their prey. The Third Fleet had won. But victory came with a cost. 12 ships were destroyed. Hundreds of crew members were wounded. The Indomitable was barely functional. But as Captain Jiho looked at the tactical display showing the fleeing Krathix, he allowed himself a small smile. The silence after battle was always strange. One moment, space was filled with explosions and weapons fire. The next, there was only the soft hum of damaged ships and the quiet voices of rescue crews. Captain Jiho walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, past walls scorched by fire and sections sealed off from vacuum breaches. His ship had survived, but she would need months of repairs. Medical Officer Yunji had set up a field hospital in the main cargo bay. The wounded lined the walls on emergency stretchers. Some had burns from acid spray. Others had broken bones from violent maneuvers. All of them were being treated by a combination of human medics and Valoran healers who had emerged from the tunnels to help. Jiho stopped beside one bed where Lieutenant Suman was being treated for minor injuries. Her arm was bandaged, but she was smiling. "I should write you up for destroying a perfectly good fighter," Jiho said. Suman laughed. "Put it on my record, sir. I'll do it again if I have to." Near the entrance to the cargo bay, Jiho found High Scholar Velmora. She was tall and elegant, her species known for their grace. She looked nothing like a human. Her skin had a slight blue tint, and her eyes were large and placed on the sides of her head. Prey eyes designed to watch for danger. She had probably never hurt another living thing in her life. When she saw Jiho, she approached quickly. For a moment, he thought she might speak. Instead, she did something unexpected. She bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Valoran culture. "You came," she said, her voice soft. "Everyone said you would not. The council, our own leaders, they all said we were abandoned. But you came." Jiho felt uncomfortable with the gratitude. He was a military man, not a diplomat. "We answered your distress call. That's what you do when someone asks for help." "Not in this galaxy," Velmora said. "In this galaxy, species calculate risk versus reward. They vote on whether lives are worth saving. You did not calculate. You did not vote. You simply came." Behind her, Valoran children were emerging from the cargo shuttles. They looked scared but alive. Human crew members were giving them food and blankets. Lieutenant Doyen, still in his flight suit, was sitting on the floor with a group of young Valorans. He was showing them pictures on his tablet, images of Earth. The children seemed fascinated. "Your people are good with children," Velmora observed. "This surprises many species. They expect humans to be only warriors. We're parents too," Jiho said. "Most of my crew have families back on Earth or the colonies. We fight so our children don't have to." Velmora nodded slowly. "The galaxy does not understand this about humans. They see your strength and your weapons. They do not see your hearts." While rescue operations continued, Commander Yuna was dealing with a different kind of battle. The Galactic Council wanted answers. She stood in the communication room, facing a holographic projection of the full council assembly. Dozens of alien species stared at her with expressions ranging from anger to fear to curiosity. High Chancellor Thexel spoke first. His crystalline body glowed with agitation. Commander Yuna, the human fleet engaged in military action without council authorization. This is a direct violation of the Charter. Explain yourself. Yuna stood at attention, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from a small fire she had helped extinguish. With respect, Chancellor, we responded to a distress call. The Charter allows for emergency intervention to prevent genocide. The Council voted against intervention. Another ambassador interjected. This one was from the Drix, a species that looked like mobile plants. Your species ignored our decision. The Council voted to let innocent people die, Yuna said bluntly. We made a different choice. The chamber erupted in multiple languages. Some ambassadors were outraged. Others seemed impressed. A few looked thoughtful. Ambassador Nari, representing Earth, stepped forward. Honored Council, let me be clear. The human fleet acted according to our values. We will not apologize for saving lives. If you wish to punish us for this, then do so, but know that we would make the same choice again. Ambassador Crixall of the Paxili rose to speak. He was the same ambassador who had first evaluated Earth decades ago. I have a question for Commander Yuna. Your fleet faced an enemy that has destroyed 14 civilizations. Yet you defeated them. How? Yuna considered her answer carefully. The Krathiks are adapted to fight species from peaceful worlds. They expect enemies to maintain distance, to rely on shields and energy weapons, to follow predictable tactics. We did none of those things. We fought like we were taught to fight on Earth, close, aggressive, and adaptable. You fought like predators, Crixall said. Yes, Yuna admitted. We did. There was a long silence. Then Crixall did something that shocked everyone. He changed the color of his crystalline body to a shade that indicated approval and respect. Then perhaps the galaxy needs predators. The Krathiks are also predators. It seems it takes a Deathworlder to stop a Deathworlder. While the political debates raged, Dr. He-Jin was conducting research that would change the galaxy's understanding of both humans and the Krathiks. She had collected biological samples from dead Krathiks bioships and was analyzing them in her laboratory aboard the Discovery. What she found was remarkable. She sent her findings directly to Captain Jiho, knowing the Council would want to see them too. Captain, I've completed my analysis of the Krathiks' biology. They originated from a Class 11 death world, nearly as hostile as Earth. Their evolution was driven by constant warfare with other species on their planet. So they're like us? Jiho asked over the communication link. Not exactly, He-Jin said. They evolved to consume and expand. Every aspect of their biology is optimized for conquest. But humans evolved differently. We developed cooperation, creativity, and most importantly, empathy. We could have become like the Krathiks. Instead, we became protectors. This information was transmitted to the Council. It sparked a new debate. If both humans and Krathiks came from death worlds, but evolved such different values, what did that say about the nature of Deathworlder species? Back on the Indomitable, Engineer Tae Yang was performing miracles to keep the ship functional. He had been working for 30 hours straight, running on nothing but coffee and stubborn determination. When Jiho found him in the engine room, Tae Yang was covered in grease and looked ready to collapse. Report, Jiho said. The ship is held together by hope and welding, Tae Yang said. Main engines are at 40%. Life support is stable. Weapons are mostly functional. We can limp home, but we're not fighting anyone for a while. Good enough, Jiho said. Take a break. That's an order. Tae Yang nodded but didn't move. Captain, I heard what the Council is saying. That we're too dangerous, that we should be restricted. Are we going to have to give up our fleet? I don't know, Jiho said honestly. But I know this. We did the right thing. We saved an entire species. Whatever happens next, we can live with ourselves. A week after the battle, High Scholar Velmora stood before the Galactic Council. She had been invited to give testimony about the human intervention. Many expected her to simply thank the humans and return home. Instead, she gave a speech that would be studied for generations. Honored Council, I come from a species that has never known war. We study mathematics and philosophy. We believe in peace through understanding. When the Krathiks attacked us, we had no defense. We sent our distress call expecting no answer. The Council voted that we were not worth saving. And in that moment I understood something about the galaxy. Peace is easy when everyone is safe. True character shows when someone is in danger. She turned to look at the human delegation. Ambassador Nari stood there, along with Commander Yuna and several other officers. The humans came for us. Not because we had anything to offer them. Not because they owed us a debt. They came because they heard someone crying for help and they could not ignore it. You call them Deathworlders. You fear their strength. But I tell you this. The humans are not dangerous because they come from a violent world. They are valuable because they learned compassion despite their violent world. Velmora paused, letting her words sink in. The Krathiks also come from a death world. But they became monsters. Humans became heroes. The difference is not where they come from. The difference is what they chose to become. The council chamber was silent. Then slowly, Ambassador Crixall began to make the sound his species used for applause. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some species still feared humanity. But enough changed their minds that day to matter. That night, aboard the Indomitable, Captain Jiho walked through the memorial hall. Holographic images of the fallen flickered in the air. 217 human lives lost in the battle. Each one had a name, a story, a family somewhere who would mourn them. Commander Yuna found him there. She said nothing at first. They simply stood together in silence, honoring the dead. Did we do the right thing? Jiho finally asked. We saved 3,000 Velerans, Yuna said. We stopped the Krathiks expansion. We showed the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises. Yes, sir. We did the right thing, Jiho nodded. The cost had been high. But some things were worth any price. As he left the memorial hall, he thought about Velmora's words. Humans could have become monsters. Instead, they chose to be protectors. That choice, made every day by billions of humans across space, was what truly made them different. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Ixtheta. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Krathiks, who had seemed unstoppable for half a century, had retreated to their home system. Intelligence reports suggested they were rebuilding, but they had not launched a single attack since their defeat. For the first time in living memory, the Krathiks expansion had stopped. On the rebuilt Veloran colony, High Scholar Velmora stood before a monument made of simple stone. Carved into its surface were the names of every human who had died defending her people. It had become a sacred place for Velerans. Parents brought their children here to teach them about courage and sacrifice. Velmora touched the stone gently, her fingers tracing the name of Commander Minho, who had sacrificed his ship to save others. She had never met him, but his crew had told her stories. He had loved poetry and had a daughter waiting for him on Mars. He would never see her grow up. We will never forget, Velmora whispered to the stone. We will never forget what you did for us. Far away in the chambers of the Galactic Council, a historic vote was taking place. Ambassador Nari stood at the center of the assembly, surrounded by representatives from over 100 species. Some looked at her with respect. Others still showed fear. But all of them were paying attention. High Chancellor Thexel raised his crystalline hand for silence. We have debated for 6 lunar cycles. Now we must vote. The motion is this: to grant humanity full military authority to respond to existential threats anywhere in the galaxy. They will become our rapid response force, authorized to act without prior council approval in emergency situations. There were murmurs throughout the chamber. This was unprecedented. No species had ever been given such authority. But the galaxy had seen what humans could do. More importantly, they had seen what humans chose to do with their power. Before we vote, said Ambassador Crixall, I wish to speak. He stepped forward, his body glowing with earnest colors. I was the first of our people to meet humans. I filed the report that classified Earth as a death world. I recommended caution when dealing with them. I was afraid of what they might become. He paused, looking directly at Nari. I was wrong to fear them. Or perhaps I was right to fear them, but wrong about what they would do with their power. The humans could have used the battle at Ixtheta to demand concessions to expand their territory, to threaten us. Instead, they saved a peaceful species and asked for nothing in return. I vote in favor of this motion. The voting began. Species cast their votes through their communication crystals. The chamber filled with light as each vote registered. Green for yes, red for no, amber for abstaining. The votes came in slowly. When the final count appeared, Nari felt her heart race. The motion passed, not unanimously. 17 species had voted against it, and 23 had abstained. But it passed with a clear majority. Humanity was now the galaxy's protectors. Nari returned to Earth a week later. She was greeted as a hero, but she knew the real heroes were elsewhere. She immediately traveled to the Naval Command Center where the Third Fleet was being rebuilt. The Indomitable was in dry dock, undergoing extensive repairs. Captain Jiho was there overseeing the work. When he saw Nari, he saluted. "Congratulations, Ambassador. You won." "We won," Nari corrected him. "You won it on the battlefield. I just made the Council accept reality." Jiho looked up at his ship. New armor was being installed. Incorporating technology from 3 different species, the Council might fear humans, but they were willing to give them the tools they needed. What happens now? Now we expand the fleet. The Third Fleet becomes the Fifth Fleet. You're being promoted to Admiral. Your mission is to train a new generation of officers, not just humans. Other species are requesting to serve alongside us. This surprised Jiho. They want to join us? After everything they said about Deathworlders? They're terrified, Nari admitted. But they're more terrified of the next Krathiks. You showed them that survival sometimes requires teeth. Now they want to learn from you. At the Naval Academy on Luna, Commander Yuna was already teaching those lessons. She had been promoted to Admiral and given command of the training program. Her first class consisted of 300 cadets from 20 different species. Some were humanoid. Others were completely alien, requiring specialized equipment just to breathe the same air. Yuna stood before them on the first day, looking at the nervous faces. "I know what many of you have heard about humans. We're violent. We're aggressive. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day. All of that is true. But here's what those rumors don't tell you. We're also loyal. We're also compassionate. And we never ever leave anyone behind." She activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Ixtheta. "You're here to learn human military tactics. But tactics are not what won this battle. What won was a simple principle. We heard someone in trouble and we went to help. Everything else, all the weapons and strategies and ships, those are just tools. The real strength comes from caring enough to use those tools for others." A young Paxili cadet raised his crystalline hand. His name was Nexil, and he was Ambassador Krixal's grandson. "Admiral Yuna, how do we overcome fear? When I saw the recordings of that battle, I was terrified. How do humans fight when they're afraid?" Yuna smiled. "Who said we're not afraid? Fear is natural. It keeps you alive. The trick is not to eliminate fear. The trick is to care about something more than you fear death. When my friend Suman ejected her power core into that Krathix formation, she was terrified. But she was more concerned about the Velerans hiding below than she was about her own safety. Lieutenant Doyen was also teaching, running the flight school. His classes were notorious for their difficulty. He pushed alien pilots to their limits and sometimes beyond. But those who survived his training became some of the best pilots in the galaxy. On this particular day, he was teaching a mixed squadron of humans and Zenthari. The Zenthari were reptilian warriors proud of their flying skills. They had initially resisted learning from humans, but after seeing recordings of the Valkyrie Squadron's performance at Ixtheta, they had requested Doyen as their instructor. "Today we practice high G maneuvers," Doyen announced. "Humans can handle up to 9 Gs before blacking out. Zenthari can handle up to 6. We're going to push both species to their limits." One of the Zenthari students, a warrior named Kresh, spoke up. "Instructor Doyen, why push us until we fail? Should we not train within our capabilities?" "No," Doyen said simply. "In battle, the enemy doesn't care about your capabilities. They'll push you past your limits. I need you to know exactly where those limits are, so you can recognize when you're approaching them. More importantly, I need you to know that you can recover when you exceed them." He pulled up footage from the battle. "Watch this. This is Lieutenant Suman. She pulls a 9G turn here. Her vision tunnels. She's seconds from blacking out. But she knows her body. She knows exactly how long she can maintain that turn before her brain shuts down. So she holds it for exactly 4 seconds, destroys her target, and then levels out to let her blood pressure recover." The alien students watched in awe. Kresh made a sound of respect. "This is the difference. You know yourselves. You have pushed these limits so many times that you can fight right at the edge without falling over." "Exactly," Doyen said. "And that's what we're going to teach you. Lieutenant Suman had recovered from her injuries and was now running the Tactical Simulations Department. She had designed a program that recreated the Battle of Ixtheta, allowing students to experience the battle from different perspectives. Some students played as human commanders. Others played as Krathix leaders. The goal was to understand both sides of the conflict. After one particularly intense simulation, a group of students approached her with questions. One of them, a human cadet named Jiwan, asked, "Lieutenant, in the simulation I played as the Krathix commander. I couldn't find a way to counter the human tactics. How would you have fought against us if you were them?" Suman considered the question seriously. "That's a good question. The Krathix problem was that they had never lost before. They had won so often that they stopped adapting. If I were commanding them, I would have retreated earlier, analyzed the human tactics, and come back with a counter-strategy. Never be so proud that you can't retreat and learn." Back on Earth, Dr. Heejin was conducting research that would shape the future of human-alien relations. She was working on a project to identify other death worlds in the galaxy and determine if they had spawned intelligent life. Her theory was that death worlds produce two types of species: conquerors like the Krathix, or protectors like humans. Her research had identified 3 potential death worlds with signs of technological civilization. The question was whether to make contact, and if so, how to approach them. Would they be friends or enemies? Heejin was presenting her findings to a council committee when Ambassador Nari asked the critical question. "If we find more Deathworlder species, what should we do?" "We should welcome them," Heejin said without hesitation. "The galaxy has relied on peace through isolation for too long. Peace through strength and cooperation is more sustainable. If we can find other Deathworlder species and integrate them into the galactic community, we'll all be stronger."